Hello, welcome to part 2 of our Steak 101 series, where we're going to talk about setting ourselves up for cooking the steak, what equipment we are going to need, and how we are going to season the steak. If you're not familiar with me, hey, I'm Baker Betty. I'm a baking educator, but I'm also a trained chef, and I own a recreational cooking and baking school in Chicago called Betty's Chicago. We do savory cooking classes and baking classes, and in the last video, we talked about picking out a steak, the things you want to consider when you're at the grocery store to pick out the steak. So if you're interested in that, click on the comment and it will take you back to part 1. But let's talk about getting ourselves set up for cooking. So let's first talk about what kind of pan we're going to use. So I personally think there are 2 options for cooking a steak at home. Probably the most common and what most people are going to prefer is a good, well-seasoned cast iron pan. This is a great option. It's going to hold heat well. It's going to get a great sear. You're going to get a nice crust on your steak. Great option. But I actually think equally as good of an option, and what we use here in our steakhouse class, is a stainless steel pan. I think this is a great option. It's a little easier to maintain. You don't have to try to, make sure you're keeping the season well cared for on your cast iron pan, especially like when you're at a cooking school and you have to take care of many pans. But I think the thing about a stainless steel pan that people often don't like is just that they actually kind of don't know how to use it. So I'm going to show you how to do it when we get to the next part where we actually cook the steak, how to heat up the pan properly to make sure you have a non-stick surface before your steak goes in the pan. Your meat will get a really good sear, but it's not going to attach to the pan and be very difficult to flip and also clean. So either one of those are great options, and the technique that I'm going to show you to cook the steak in the next video will work for either pan, but I usually use a stainless steel pan. Okay, other pieces of equipment you're going to need. A good digital thermometer. Obviously, we are going to need to take the internal temperature of our steak to make sure that it's cooked to the way we like it. This is a Thermapen. It is my favorite digital thermometer. It's super fast, super accurate, but just any good digital probe thermometer where you can stick it right into the center of the steak and see where you are at in the cooking process. You also are going to want a good set of tongs to flip your steak, and that's really it for the cooking process. Very, very limited things that you're going to need to cook your steak. Now, let's talk about seasoning our steak, what to season our steak with, and how we are going to season it, or when we're going to season it. So I recommend only putting salt and black pepper on the surface of your steak. We can add other flavors in later, and I'm gonna show you how to do like a butter baste at the end with some rosemary and garlic, but you could also add an herb butter in at the end. But salt and pepper are the only 2 things I recommend actually putting on the surface of your steak, because you're going to be putting that surface of the steak in a hot pan, and other spices and herbs are going to tend to burn. So I personally don't like to use other seasonings other than just the salt and pepper. Now, I like a coarse salt. This is actually Maldon salt. It's like this really fluffy, big, flaky sea salt. Sometimes I'll use kosher salt, like either Diamond or Morton kosher is fine. But I do like a coarser salt. I think it gives like a nice texture to the outside of the steak. And then I just have coarse ground black pepper here as well. Now, as to when you're gonna season your steak, you have 2 options. You can either season it right before it goes in the pan. And I mean truly, like right before it goes in the pan, because when we put salt on the surface of our steak, it is going to start drawing moisture to the surface very quickly, like within a couple minutes. Moisture is going to start coming to the surface of the steak. So if we do that too early, when the steak goes in the pan, it's going to have all this surface moisture that has to evaporate off before the Maillard reaction can start happening. So the Maillard reaction is like the browning that happens on the surface of food, and it can't really happen until around 280 degrees Fahrenheit, I think, and water evaporates around 212 Fahrenheit. So if you have a bunch of moisture on the surface, a bunch of energy is going to have to be spent to evaporate off that moisture before it can hit 280 and start that browning. And we really want that Maillard reaction to happen as quickly as possible, so we get that really nice crust, because that is flavor. That is all flavor. So we don't want it to be sitting in the pan for a really long time without that happening. So we're gonna either season it right before it goes in the pan, or a better option is to do something called dry brining, where we're gonna season it at least an hour beforehand and up to 24 hours beforehand. And if you're gonna do this, I recommend putting it on something like this. I just have a cooling rack kind of set up on a sheet pan here. And so that way, if any juices come off, they're caught on the pan. And what's gonna happen when you season your steak at least an hour earlier is that moisture is gonna come to the surface, but it will start reabsorbing back into the meat. And it's also gonna start absorbing that salt down into the meat. And it's going to make a more evenly seasoned piece of meat. Instead of it just being seasoned on the surface, it's gonna be seasoned all the way throughout. If you were gonna season it right before it goes in the pan, you're gonna do this the exact same way as if you were dry brining it. You wanna take some paper towels and you really, really wanna pat the surface dry on both sides. Especially if it's gonna go in the pan right away, because remember, we don't want any of that surface moisture. We want it to be really, really nice and dry so we get that Maillard reaction really quickly. So you're gonna pat dry both sides. Once it's nice and dry, then I'm gonna come in with my seasoning. Now, I'm only using the seasoning on this steak, so I'm gonna go in with my hand that's already dirty. Obviously, if you have like a big salt cellar, don't put your steaky hand into your salt that you're gonna use for other things. But this is specifically for this steak, so I'm gonna go ahead and put my hand in. But we're going to season this really, really well with our flaky salt. And you want to kind of hold your hand up a few inches above the steak. That's going to help you get a really, really nice kind of even distribution. And then I want to come in here and kind of press the salt in so that it's attaching itself to the steak. Now I'm going to flip it over and do the other side. Now, if you're going to do this right before it goes in the pan, you can go ahead and do your black pepper. I'm going to hold off on the black pepper and do that right before that goes in my pan because this one's going to sit for a little while before I cook it. Now, if you are dry brining, you are going to, if you're going to do it for just an hour, you can actually just leave it out at room temperature so that it takes some of the chill off the steak before it goes in the pan. But if you're going to do it for longer than that, you're going to put this whole thing into your refrigerator like this uncovered. And that is going to start drying out the surface of the steak. It's going to really, really absorb that salt in. It's going to really, really nicely season it. I do also like to come in and, especially on thicker steaks, season the edges as well. I'm going to sear off my fat cap here on the edge of my steak, get that nice and crispy. So I want that to be seasoned as well. And that is it for seasoning. Okay, in our next video, I'm gonna do a demo on how to cook a really nice, simple steak at home, and it's gonna be perfect and delicious. Okay, bye.